Hello and welcome to another episode of the M&A Talk at businessesforsale.com with M&A Chief at businessesforsale.com, Nick Pili. Today we are talking all things acquisition and what a business owner has to do when he receives a serious offer from a business buyer. Nick, hello, welcome to M&A Talk.
Hello, Marcus. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm really good, and just really sort of want to dig into this idea of when a serious business offer lands on the desk of a business owner, what does he or she and their team have to do to really make sure this is a real offer, a credible offer, a serious offer for a business opportunity?
So, I think, going back to sort of basics, the most important thing, out of the gate is to make sure that communication is always top of mind. And I know this sounds crazy, but the amount of sellers that we speak to that receive verbal offers over the telephone or quick email or a text message, I would always, encourage that seller to go back to the buyer and say, look, please present me the offer in a recognized format. You've got to send me typically a letter of intent document, an LOI, to obviously not only put in there what the offer price is, but specifically all the terms around what that offer is and any sort of contingencies around that. So, don't really accept or agree to anything until you get to see what that LOI is. And
So
then
just for
obviously
clarification, an
yes.
LOI is a letter of intent, and is it a legally formatted expression of interest?
Well, no, an LOI, a letter of intent, is not a legally binding document, but is really the recognized format in, I guess, the M&A in the business world of how a buyer should present sellers with a bona fide, a serious offer.
And would you say, sorry to cut across you, would you say that LOI has to be formulated with an accountant, a lawyer present, or is it something a serious buyer could do by himself or herself?
Yeah, I think experienced buyers are very well formatted, and obviously you can go onto the internet these days or even speak to somebody at businessesforsale.com, and we can obviously provide you with what that particular format and structure typically is. And some people do use their attorney or their legal representative to help them create what that LOI should be, and obviously to go through those terms very quickly. But it's not just about the offer price, right? If somebody's offering you $1 million or $10 million for your business, the most important things to look at from the seller's perspective is, what are the payment terms for that particular offer? Is somebody looking to pay you so much cash up front and then so much over perhaps 2 or 3 years and expecting you to hold a note from a seller financing, or as they call it in Canada, a vendor take back perspective. And I think these are all the details. The devil's always in the details, as they say, that you as that seller need to make sure that you're reviewing every single step of the way.
And what if we were to go deeper into sort of reviewing such an offer, what other things would a vendor or a seller, a business owner need to consider when reviewing an offer like this that comes in with an LOI?
So I think the biggest thing, from a seller's perspective, to consider is exclusivity. Most buyers that present an LOI, with obviously payment offer and payment terms, are things like exclusivity. They always want to have a period where that particular seller will then pause any marketing or the opportunity to actually speak to any other buyers during a period of due diligence, as that particular buyer and seller work towards that magic share purchase agreement, which is obviously the foundation for the closing of the transaction. And there are several pros and cons on both sides, obviously, with that exclusivity agreement. From a seller's perspective, you may have a very good business, it's attracting a lot of attention. And unfortunately, if you go and enter a period, 60, 90-day period of exclusivity with a seller, and the danger is that particular buyer pulls out, the whole deal then falls down, and you've lost those 60 to 90 days worth of marketing. So I think that's one serious consideration that a seller must have when looking at an LOI.
So what you're saying is that once you've received that LOI and you're sort of want to move forward, then creating that sort of period of exclusivity, would that require almost like a letter of intent back from the business owner back to the prospective buyer? Is it almost a counter LOI?
Well, I think there are negotiations that take place when an LOI is presented. But I think, the question that a seller always must ask themselves is, how serious is this buyer? How serious are they, and how likely are they to actually close on the transaction? Are they able to raise the financing? And a lot of, sellers these days are asking for either money to be placed into escrow, a small deposit to be placed, with their attorney, with their legal representative, to show obviously willingness on that buyer's behalf, or in some cases, a non-refundable deposit that again shows that seriousness of that particular buyer, which gives that seller the level of comfort to enter into that 60 to 90-day period of exclusivity in obviously to close on that transaction. But I think at the end of the day, it always goes back as well to the seller. How confident are they that a lender, a finance will come in and look at their business to provide that buyer perhaps with the balance of the transaction that they particularly need to move forward? Is their business credit worthy in order for somebody to borrow money against to pay for that? And I think if the seller's got confidence that their business will stand up to that type of review from a financial institution, and they're confident and the motivation of the seller, of the buyer, sorry, and the buyer is willing to actually put down maybe some money into escrow to show their seriousness, then of course you could consider that short period, 60 to 90 days of exclusivity to allow sort of other buyers to go on hold while that takes place.
Typically, what kind of percentage are we talking about in terms of money put into escrow, almost as like I mean, before any prospective buyer would do that, they would have to be really, really keen to buy the business, right? So you know that once that happens, you've got a really good opportunity of closing the deal.
Yeah, I mean, what we typically see is between 3 to 5% that goes into sort of that escrow account, and I think that the buyer would typically get their money back if they uncover something untoward about that business, something's not quite right within the financial audited accounts, or something like that. There's perhaps legal action that's not been declared about the business that they uncover during that due diligence period.
Okay, that's a really, really fascinating point, Nick. I mean, one thing I do want to ask is, just out of interest, how do we at businessesforsale.com, what do we do to qualify buyers before we present the prospective purchaser to the business broker or the owner that's selling the business?
So we do have a team in place that I help sort of guide. And, our job is to go out there and not only understand, what your business is, but who the right sort of buyer would be, based on obviously location, industry experience, deposit available. And our job is to speak to those buyers in detail to really recognize and understand, are they serious about buying your business? Typically at any one time on our website, businessesforsale.com, we have about 55,000 live listings from around the world. So a favorite question that I always ask every buyer is, out of the 55,000 businesses that we've got, tell me why you're interested in this specific business. And I'm always trying to play devil's advocate with that buyer, not to be sort of a pain in the backside to them, but to really help qualify why they're interested and maybe to make them think through questions. I actually spoke to a buyer yesterday who was looking at a business in the greater Vancouver area, but this particular buyer was from Ontario. So, one of the questions I'm asking is, are you really serious about moving your whole family to Vancouver for this particular business? And I think, once that buyer started to think about it, they realized that maybe they wouldn't, do that. So that sort of helped rule them out at that time. So we could then find them something else, obviously within the GTA. So, for us, we're working and acting on behalf of sellers, but we're really trying to play the right sort of matchmaker behind the scenes to really make sure that time is a commodity. We don't want to waste anybody's time, our time, the seller's time, or the buyer's time.
Nick, as always a pleasure to speak to you on M&A Talk, the weekly M&A chat for the small and medium-sized enterprise, typically between $1 million and $20 million. Nick, thank you again, and I hope you have a very good week.
Thank you, Marcus. Take care. Bye-bye.